My name is Gloria Zhang. I'm one of the producers on the Mercenaries team. Very happy to see you today.
Mm-hmm. And I'm Ben Lee. I'm game director for Hearthstone, and I game direct Hearthstone.
How long has Hearthstone Mercenaries been in the works, and what made you want to create this specific kind of game mode?
I can take the why, Gloria, if you want to take the what and how long. When we're making Battlegrounds, we found this, really fun new way to play Hearthstone. And just before we launched Battlegrounds, we felt like this was something we wanted to do more of and experiment with. So we had a small team of people, pitch some ideas, come up with different ways to play. And Paul Nguyen was the designer heading that up. He's also the designer that created the original Dungeon Run. So he came up with a number of different ideas, one of which was Mercenaries. The main focus was around characters and RPG progression. So it was like taking a bunch of things that he'd learned from Dungeon Run and the roguelike content that he'd made for Hearthstone, and really putting that into some kind of permanent progression system. So we found that really compelling. Players love, getting attached to a character, evolving them, leveling them up, gaining that power, and then overcoming new challenges. So that was the core kind of concept behind Mercenaries. As for kind of how long we've been working on it, I think I can hand that over to Gloria.
Yeah, actually, like Ben mentioned earlier, we started with a tiny small team, and mostly Paul and a few others who were very passionate about what's going to be the next biggest thing for Hearthstone. And we gathered together right before the pandemic to do brainstorming, stuff like that. And once the pitch got approved, the pandemic started. So the majority of the work was actually being done during the pandemic.
You had the primer live stream at the end of August, and there seemed to be a little initial confusion as to how Mercenaries would play. So after that stream was over, did the team get together and determine, okay, maybe we need to clarify further how Mercenaries works? Or was there confidence that the players base can just pick it up as they go along?
I think we've always thought the players will be able to just once they get to grips with Mercenaries. It's pretty straightforward when you're actually playing it, especially through the tutorial and the early characters that you get into the game with. We've built this pretty extensive ramp where the game starts off quite simple, and eventually, the heroic endgame content or the PvP endgame content, there's a huge amount of depth and complexity that we think is going to be really fun and challenging for players. So we're not super worried about that. We hope we've done a really good job on explaining that to players in the game. In terms of kind of media and publishing around the game, there's been recent events at Blizzard have definitely needed to take center stage rather than our own publishing efforts. So we had a plan, and that plan needed to change so that some other more important topics could take center stage for a while.
How do the mercenary units differ from standard Hearthstone minions?
Mercenaries are more like, it's a little bit like they're each individually a hero. So in Hearthstone, you have your hero, you play minions, you cast spells. The mercenary is kind of like a little version of that. So you have a character, and it is a minion on the board, but it has 3 abilities. It has a lot of health and a lot of attack. So they're really big, beefy minions that are going to last a long time, that have their own kind of abilities and statistics and equipment. So there's a lot of customization and upgrading that you can do. You can equip different items on them. You can change their appearances through different vanity portraits that you can earn. So they're new, interesting, and different, and we hope players will really like them.
Mercenary units look like they're divided by race, similar to kind of how standard minions have their tribes. How many different races are there in Mercenaries, and how do they synergize with one another?
I forget the specific amount. There's quite a lot. When looking through the cast of characters, there could be a gnome, a tauren, there's lots of different types. There's some types that we fill out the rosters of more initially, and those are really the focus of where the gameplay is going to be. And those are specifically, there's a lot of human characters in the Warcraft license. There's a lot of demons, there's a lot of beasts. Those are some of and orcs, I think, actually is one of the big things that we've hit as well. There's a lot of really awesome orc characters in the Warcraft license. So I think those are the biggest ones, but we also actually have attack types that synergize. So there's 2 types of synergies. There's actually more than that, but there's two really big ones. It's kind of the minion type synergy, which is orc, human, and then there's also the elemental attack type, which could be fire, frost, and then there's inter-synergies within that too. I think a lot of the fun of Mercenaries is going to be for players figuring out those awesome combos, making the most of those abilities and those synergies. There's some really awesome explosive things that you can make happen, and during a PvE bounty, you actually get treasures along the way, which are temporary bonuses as well. And some of those make, some of those combos even more crazy. We really wanted to ratchet the power up to 11 on the PvE bounty maps to give players the chance to have fun. And if players manage to find strategies which make it so they can overwhelm a boss, sometimes that's going to happen, and we want that to happen sometimes, because you're going to remember that awesome story where you completely destroyed that level because you've got this awesome, fun, unexpected combo. And so that's what we're going for, and we've put a lot of effort into trying to make that the case, and I think the team have really delivered on the treasures and combos and abilities. So we'll see how players enjoy it.
Some of the scenes in Mercenaries will look familiar to longtime players. I've seen the Barrens, I've seen Black Rock Mountain. Will players journey across other regions of Azeroth in future updates?
Totally. We're not ready to reveal which ones, but there's definitely going to be other locations that you go to. I think we have some more post-launch content that's coming to finish the story of Black Rock Mountain. So players can look forward to that. But beyond that, we're definitely going to be going to some pretty diverse and interesting locales that are maybe not always what you'd expect.
Gloria, you mentioned that the pandemic sort of impacted development for Mercenaries. Was there anything that had to be cut to make this launch date?
No, I don't think anything critical we think will be needed for launch is cut for this reason. So basically for the team, the goal is to release the game mode when we feel it's ready and when we feel it is something we feel proud to release. So that's the main factor for us to manage the scope and the schedule.
Are there any mercenary units that you might have in mind for the future? And would they be themed after whatever the current Hearthstone expansion is?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. We have a pretty extensive release schedule planned already up through, I think, we've actually planned out up to the 25 release cycle, which for those that might not know, that basically means the kind of the final expansion of next calendar year, 2022, which release, November, December, depending. We've actually planned up our Mercenaries all through that expansion. So actually, we know what characters and locations we're going to up until, I think, April 2023, which is a fair amount of time away. And there's a lot of interesting characters in there, some big lore heavy hitters that are missing from the launch cycle. There might be a few dragons that aren't in the launch cycle that feel absent. Those are coming. And there's also a bunch of other characters, some of which are things that I think players find pretty unique to Hearthstone that aren't really explored in the rest of the Warcraft universe. There's some of those coming too. I think some of the most interesting ones that are coming in the future are probably the ones that players might not expect to be a mercenary. Maybe they're a little, they're in their imagination right now, they're thinking, mercenaries are generally humanoid characters that are, in theory, kind of people-sized in most cases. There's definitely some things coming in the future that are not people-sized.
So there were a couple of pre-order bundles available for Mercenaries, and some of them, like the Lich King and Diablo, they look really powerful. So when people saw that, they sort of started getting the impression that this might be a pay-to-win scenario. So how do you dispel that notion? How do you dispel the notion that Mercenaries has a pay-to-win element when somebody could just plunk down some money and start off their Mercenaries run with a unit as powerful as Diablo?
So in terms of the way the free-to-play economy works in Mercenaries, we've actually put a huge amount of effort into trying to make Mercenaries really free-to-play friendly. There's so many avenues for you to earn packs, currency, upgrades for your characters. Just when you go into the game, you start with these 6 characters. Some of those 6 characters I would call out specifically: Cariel, Millhouse, and Zyrella. They're some of the best characters in the game, and we give you those off the bat. Like, I use Zyrella in my endgame teams, I use Cariel in a bunch of my endgame teams, and you're going to get tons of progression for them as you play through the game. So if you want to play Mercenaries free to play, you can play through all of the normal mode content with just that basic team. that's not even a realistic scenario because players get packs along the way. They're going to open them and find some characters. Some players are going to open up their first pack and get a Lich King mercenary or a Diablo mercenary. Some players are going to open them up and get a rare mercenary, because in those first packs you're always going to get new characters, and we give you some of those as you kind of ramp into mercenaries. You're also getting tons of rewards of currencies. If you decide to engage in PvP, there's daily rewards and seasonal rewards on top of that. I think one of the key things as well is there isn't actually a limit on how much currency you can earn per day in mercenaries. If you want to play 100 PvE maps in one day and get rewards, you can. We don't arbitrarily cap you at a certain amount of currency or rewards. So players can, if they want to really get into mercenaries and grind and really earn everything, they absolutely can. We've tried to make it so that's a reasonable proposition for players to do also. I think, to go back a little bit to what I mentioned earlier, we had a really great plan for how to reveal mercenaries, and a bunch of that, players would have been educated more about the game mode and what it contains when our pre-purchase kind of information and release happened. The reality is, again, there were other things that needed to take center stage, and it didn't feel right at that moment for us to be talking about, hey, here's a product we're selling. So we wanted to clear the way for more important voices to be heard.
And on top of that, I would also like to mention that, in fact, all the mercenaries, they're viable. That's the goal for the team. So we didn't purposely balance or make any mercenaries super powerful over the other mercenaries. We want every mercenaries to be visible, to be useful, will be in play. And if for certain players, if they're in love with certain mercenaries, they can just find out which bounty will give you that mercenary specific coins, and you can just farm that. It's totally free. You can even just use the starting mercenary party we gave you during the tutorial to just farm whatever mercenary coins you would like to have, and just craft that mercenaries.
So, sort of, as long as I'm on the topic of Diablo, will this be the only crossover that Mercenaries has with Blizzard's sister series, or are there more plans down the road?
We've got something in the works, not ready to talk about what that is, but there are certain licenses that make sense for us to work with more so than others. Like, at the end of the day, Diablo is a demon. So if you're not familiar with who Diablo is, it doesn't really feel alien when you're playing it. It feels, what we've seen is players feel it's kind of cool and it's interesting. Diablo fits into a demon team. Probably a bit harder to put Reina or a battle cruiser into Mercenaries, although battle cruiser would be cool. So certain licenses lend themselves better to it because they're kind of similar to the source material. So we want to try and experiment with different things, but it's probably just about picking the right things. And Diablo for us felt like something that made sense, and also it celebrated a bunch of the work that other talented people, Activision Blizzard have been doing to release Diablo 2 Resurrected.
Ben, you briefly mentioned endgame content, and I want to ask, what does that entail? Like, what does endgame content look like for the single player component?
So there's basically, you can play through the campaign on kind of the normal difficulty, and you play through this story. That's the meat of the content in Mercenaries. If you're a more advanced player, you can switch to heroic, or you can complete the normal mode and then complete heroic afterwards in sequence. You can really play Mercenaries however you want. Endgame for us, though, in this sense means, there's level 30 heroic bounties. All of those are meant to be endgame content. I think, there's 4 zones in Mercenaries. There's the Barrens, there's Fellwood, there's Windspring, and there's Blackrock Mountain. Fellwood is kind of part endgame content, part not. And the latter part of it is, you could consider that endgame content. And then Windspring and Blackrock Mountain, they're intended to be the things that players are going to play repetitively. Every map is different. You'll fight different mercenaries. You'll fight different ecology fights. The boss is the same, so that there's something for you to aim for the goal and build your teams around. But we want there's a lot of content that players can repeat, and we think they're going to have fun. And then there's PvP as well on top of that. Like, you can try to be the very best if you want to and reach the top of the PvP ladder. And also beyond that as well, Mercenaries is a content-driven game to some degree. We're going to be releasing new maps, and those will have new challenges that come out. So, kind of every major patch, which for us is a .0, a .2, a .4, and a .6, Those are kind of conventions we've established with the more engaged community now, and they kind of know what that means. It's basically every month, give or take, we'll be releasing some new Mercenaries content. That's the new content kind of depends. Sometimes it's going to be 3 bosses, sometimes it's going to be 6, and those have heroic variants too. So we really want to deliver a lot of cool, fun, awesome content for Mercenaries post-launch to keep players, with something new and fun and interesting to do.
Is there a specific mechanic or an idea from Mercenaries, like for example, the more vibrant diamond portrait, where somebody from the team has said, this is really cool, we should consider adding this to standard or battlegrounds?
I think that the way Mercenaries work with having their own abilities, we don't have plans for that right now, but I would not be shocked if something like that ended up in more traditional Hearthstone modes. Having a character on the board which is really powerful and can do their own kind of abilities, I think it's super cool, and you could totally imagine something like that in Standard or Wild or Duels or Tavern Brawls or other things as well in the future. So, right now our tech doesn't really work like that, but it doesn't mean it won't. So I think that's definitely one of the things that people have really enjoyed the most is, having a mini hero basically.
And lastly, Hearthstone is a 6-year-old game, and it's so much bigger than it was when it first started. It's got 3 massive game modes. You got your traditional Hearthstone, your Battlegrounds, and now you got Mercenaries. So has any thought been given to issuing a standalone app for any of them in order to reduce potential strain on mobile devices?
In terms of that, I think, we have lots of different players that enjoy our game. And we really want to try and service those. There's also players that like a lot of different parts of our game. So there are absolutely players that only play Battlegrounds or only play Standard or Wild. There are also players that like to dip in and out of different things. And having all of that in the same one location is actually really convenient for that. I think in terms of the strain on mobile, there's definitely things technically that we need to improve and do better on that front. In terms of file size is one issue, but I think that the bigger issue there is just, we've been producing a lot of content, and the reality is with how complex games are today, making new things introduces new bugs. We've been making really huge systems for Hearthstone over the last couple of years. I think players really were hungry for new things to do in Hearthstone and new systems. And over the last 2.5, 3 years, we've really delivered, tons of new things. Things such as Battlegrounds, achievement systems, reward tracks, tons of single player content, new modes in Duels and in Mercenaries coming shortly also, and events on top of that. So there's always something new and interesting to do in Hearthstone, and that's definitely come with some drawbacks of needing to, of there being some technical drawbacks. And I think for 2022, we definitely want to try and focus on delivering content at a really high quality and also at a stable, as stable a rate as we're able to.
So before we go, I guess I would like to ask, what is your favorite mercenary unit? Ben and Gloria, go ahead and give me your favorite unit.
You go first, Gloria.
Oh, sure. When I look at my favorite unit in Mercenaries, it's pretty much the same as my favorite character in the standard mode, which is Alex Jaza. This is a role was very famous and popular in the World of Warcraft universe when I was playing that game as well. And in fact, I chose Alex's human form TCG card art as my development credit card in Hearthstone. So of course, when we work on Mercenary game mode, Alex became my favorite character as well. I love the Lich King. I think Arthas and the Lich King, his story, it's been a huge part of my life, playing Warcraft 3, playing World of Warcraft, and growing up through that kind of era of gaming. Arthas, I think he's just a fantastic character with lots of nuance and depth, and he's a really awesome mercenary that we've given a really great kit to. I've played a lot of Heroes of the Storm over the years, and I played something like 98% of all of my games are as Arthas. He's just a great character, and I love him. So looking forward to playing him on launch.
All right, Hearthstone Mercenaries. The update will be out on Tuesday, October the 12th. Ben and Gloria, thank you so much, and we look forward to trying it.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you so much. Enjoy the game.